everyone, I'm Elaine Chow.
And I'm Trist Curless.
And welcome to The Musician's Loop.
Loop, like a drum loop?
No, like the kind of thing that a jeweler uses to evaluate gems.
Oh, like a magnifying glass, like what we'll do on this podcast, actively listening to music like a musician.
That's right. And every week, we are choosing a track to dive into together and share our thoughts about what we find intriguing about the song.
Whether it's songwriting, chord progression, instrumentation, recording technology, arrangement, whatever, we're looking at the music we love through the lens, or the loop, of decades in the music industry.
Hey, Trist. So what do you have for us this week?
Oh, Elaine, I have, in the Great American Songbook, kind of these jazz standards that kind of make up the Great American Songbook. Most of the songs come from shows, from classic American theater.
Rodgers and Hammerstein.
Occasionally, and there's these standard songs that you hear. I've always loved it when the artists, they're taking it from the show and kind of making it their own, making it a little more jazzy, etc. But I love when, especially as an intro, sometimes as the middle or the end, which is really creative, they actually include the verse.
Oh, okay.
So not a verse like verse, chorus, bridge, like a pop song, but like the intro verse that maybe in the show a character's had. That's a little intro to the song we all know. You know what I'm talking about?
I think I do, but set us up. What are we listening to this week?
If I had really done my research, I could have had a good example to let you know exactly what I mean. But this particular song that I've chosen today is a very, very famous, very popular song that does have a verse. And actually, the verse is done fairly often. However, the version of the song that I've chosen has a verse that's different. It's a verse from somewhere else completely.
Oh, okay. So tell us about what we're listening to.
So this song for today is Over the Rainbow.
Okay, I know exactly that song.
Everyone knows this song from The Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
And there is a verse that was sung in the movie, and many versions of it, of people who've recorded, have sung a verse. However, this one does not have that same verse. This comes from a song from the movie Pete Kelly's Blues from 1955. It was sung by Peggy Lee.
Oh, okay. I know Peggy Lee, thanks to a coworker, former coworker of mine.
And so she uses the song, whether Lorez Alexandria, our singer today, thought of that herself. I don't know. There's no credit or note. I've never read anything about whose idea this is, but instead of the normal intro / verse to Over the Rainbow, the song from Pete Kelly's Blues, sung by Peggy Lee, called I Can Sing a Rainbow, is the song that she has chosen, and you can listen to it now.
Awesome. So we're going to drop the links to all of these songs inside of the show notes. Please take a pause, listen to it, and come on back. But before we take that pause, Trist, can you tell us about how we should be listening to music?
Well, what we want to do is we want to upgrade. Everyone loves an upgrade. An upgraded car rental, upgraded airline seat. I do love that. Upgrade your listening. If you have a moment to grab the nicer headphones, to put it on the nicer speakers when you're going to listen to this before we talk about it, please do. I know not everyone can, because you listen to this on your drive into work, or you drive home from work, or wherever, or taking a walk or a jog. Thank you for joining us, however you join us. But if you have the ability to upgrade your listening, please do so now. We like to support listening to the best sound possible.
Awesome. And so with that, we will be right back. And we are back. Okay, holy cows. I am absolutely obsessed with the song. Oh my goodness. I am, what do you say? What do the kids say today? Like, I'm destroyed. I'm wrecked, But yeah,
well, the kids said that someday.
Yeah. I was absolutely destroyed because I looked this up right afterwards and I was like, I need to see her in person. And it turns out that she is not a modern singer, right? I was like, oh, she's not a modern singer. So I was very frustrated by that. But oh my goodness, such a good track.
Yeah, I love using her for an example for students. if I'm teaching about phrasing in jazz, there's singing everything kind of right in the beat where it's written. And then in jazz, a large percentage of jazz is kind of back phrasing. So as the beat happens, you're not quite singing it. You sing a little bit later than the song was written. And sometimes you phrase ahead. You come in a little bit before. Just there's like a push and pull when you're singing jazz tunes, especially ballads. And there have been many greats over the years who really will lay back, but there are a few that do it as much as her. I feel like in a lot of her recordings have this thing where if you sing along in your head with the chord changes where the melody kind of usually is, sometimes they're an entire phrase ahead before she starts singing. So I love that. I love that about her singing, and it never feels like it's super forced. It still feels really natural.
Yeah, that was something that I definitely wrote down, especially as I was listening to it the second or third time. Just the relationship between her and the piano in the first half of the song. There was something that was very, you were talking about push and pull, and I wrote that down as well. But I was just thinking about the relationship and just how thoughtful and how responsive the pianist has to be, and like the singer also to the pianist, right? In that kind of case where there's a lot of, I'd say, just like nuance in how that relationship happened, because both of them are out of time, right? Like the piano isn't seriously holding any time. I feel like that time comes in about midway through the song as the rest of the ensemble comes in. But there's definitely a lot more of that freedom when it comes to this. And as someone who consistently plays to a click, because that's how we keep the band together, that's something that I'm like, oh my goodness, like talk about being off the click, right? But it was so beautiful. It was incredibly beautiful.
Yeah, I do like, and I'd kind of forgotten until recently listening again, and how in these tunes, it's pretty common you'll hear in any of these kind of slower ballads like this, because whether it's on a recording or in a live space, these really kind of long, pretty things, you need the band needs to kind of change something up just to keep you from, I mean, not literally falling asleep. I mean, maybe, but just from tuning out, because it's just so, dun, 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 it's like so, like the harmonic rhythm is so slow that at least then on the bridge, a little bit more, almost 2-beat, not even quite 4 straight swinging, but just has a little more motion for those someday I'll wish upon a star, right?
Yeah.
I love that it's like, okay, finally there's a little motion that happens, and then also very elegantly pulls out of that. So I dig how the bridge kind of just moves us ahead a little bit. Like, okay, just about I was about to be mesmerized falling asleep to this, you kind of kicked me in the rear a little bit and we're moving a little bit. So I like that.
Well, it's interesting because I don't necessarily think of, I mean, I was mesmerized. I don't think I was falling asleep in that first section there.
Sure.
I think part of it was that I was thinking about this, I don't know, maybe the third time through, as I was listening to it, just how familiar the song was. And at the same time, that familiarity, I think, with what, I grew up watching The Wizard of Oz, right? I grew up with Judy Garland's version. And of course, all of these other versions that we've heard since that have permeated our pop culture, that with this knowledge of what the melody should be, it contributes to my appreciation of what she made it.
Absolutely.
And I think that was something that was, as a musician, as a vocalist, as a jazz lover, that this was something that just blew my mind, and thinking about her interpretation of the melody and how that interplayed with my knowledge of the melody as well, which is, I think, part of the reason why standards are so important, right? In jazz music, is that the variations only come because of your knowledge of the theme. And if I think about classical music and theme and variations, it's like, okay, great. I have the theme, I play it all the way through, and now I have variation 1 through 5. And then I go back to the initial one to remind you about what the concept was. And I think in this case, it's a very similar kind of thing. This is a variation of something that is so solidly in the core of our pop culture understanding and our jazz culture understanding that it's like, oh, okay, cool. Wow. Wow. Right.
Yeah, that's my general attraction to jazz music anyway. I mean, there's definitely a place for, new creations and new melodies and then improvising on new things. But man, when it's standard stuff that, is just ingrained in you and you really know, you're right. You really appreciate the differences. And like I said, the thing I was talking about in terms of our phrasing, we all really know, even in the bridge when it's moving ahead, it's that. It's not, that's all that there is. And she's so far removed from doing that. And yet, because that's in you, that's there. You really can appreciate where she puts it and how she makes the whole thing hers, makes it her own.
Yeah, and I think that there was something that was very tender about her delivery in this, which I think, maps really well, but even more than the young child who, Dorothy Gale is in The Wizard of Oz. This was like a more mature version of that, right? Like her voice, actually, I will come back to this, but her voice, oh my goodness, her voice, right? As I was listening to this, there were elements of her voice that was very reminiscent of Ella Fitzgerald for me.
Sure.
And there were some turns that she had that were very reminiscent. And when I looked her up, I was like, oh my goodness, they were contemporaries, right? Had they sung at the same festivals, et cetera. But there was also this husky quality to her voice, almost like a rasp, like a very light rasp, right? That made it so unique. And so when she was singing, it wasn't a belting, it wasn't that like bell-like, incredibly clear voice that Ella Fitzgerald had. It was more of a tender, thoughtful interpretation of the song. Yeah. And I'm actually just kind of curious about the rest of her discography, about whether she has that same level of tenderness or thoughtfulness, or if this is just like, hey, this is a part of her range and she has so much behind her.
Right. A lot more like Sarah Vaughan to me. Kind of that darker.
Yeah.
And the feel as well. I don't know a lot about her. Even you were asking about pronunciation of her name being short for Dolores.
Yeah.
But I've always just called her Lorez Alexandria. So
as opposed to Lorez Alexandria. Yeah.
Right. Because it's short for Dolores. Is
right.
Lorez or Lorez, right? I don't know this. And frankly, I've not met, I've been a professional singer and kind of into jazz music for a long time. And I don't know that I've ever run into any of my musician friends who knew of her previously. I love sharing her with other people because of that fact, but I haven't had someone say, oh yeah, and have them share their experience of hearing her.
Right.
Even my lovely group members in the Manhattan Transfer, which many times I'm just thinking, oh, they've done this so long, they've been everywhere, they know all these singers. And when I played this on some road trip on tour, all three of them were just like, who's this? So I was like, oh, darn it. I thought one of you would tell us about, tell me about the time you met her or the time you sang or the song of hers that you liked the most. And they had not heard of her either. At the end of the episodes, we're always telling you to share any of experiences. I would love to hear from anyone who has heard of her, heard this recording or anything from her, and how you came about it or where you heard of it, as well as those of you who have not and what you think about her, etc., and who you compare her to. Back to the now, just not knowing much about her career. I know this album was on Impulse Records, so a major label at the time, a big player in jazz music, had greats like John Coltrane and many other jazz musicians. And she has several recordings, several albums, but very few for big labels. This is kind of her peak. This is like the best recording quality because the most money from the biggest labels. Maybe that's part of the thing. She didn't have major label support her whole career. She did too. There's, of course, the stereotypical cheesy album title. This is from Alexandria the Great.
Yeah.
Because of course that's the title they chose. And then her second album, most of which was probably recorded at the same time, and they just got 2 albums out of it, is More Alexandria the Great.
I see.
Those are the 2 albums that were on Impulse. And all of the others were on smaller labels. There's still good music on the others. The quality isn't as good, and probably the players aren't as good either.
Yeah, and I'm just reading through her Wikipedia entry here, and it looks like she was active between the 1950s and the 1990s. her last album released in 1993. So
if you don't look carefully enough, that could actually be a reissue of something.
No.
So-
That one, it looks like it was a brand new album.
All right.
The last line of her Wikipedia entry said that she is remembered by some as one of the most underappreciated jazz vocalists of the 20th century.
Yeah. Those kinds of little taglines you could probably add to any bio of her. There are many more accomplished jazz vocalists out there in the world than myself, but it is the thing that I've done for most of my life. And I can't remember a single fellow musician that I've asked about her that they've known who she was. So there is something to that.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap this up, one of the things that I am always very impressed by, and I know that you and I, both know some really amazing jazz singers, is really thinking about this relationship between the voice and some of the choices that you can make within the context of the chord, right? Or within the context that, provides a little shading. We're talking about 11s and 13s in here. And as someone who has always sung backgrounds, it is one of those things where that's not where my head always goes, right? As we're thinking about jazz vocals versus like traditional, like more pop vocals. And there's a part of me that is incredibly impressed by that because I don't understand how it works. It's kind of like the magic of jazz is being able to make these melodic choices in a way that is incredibly thoughtful and creative. And I'm kind of curious about like your background, and is that something that you've had to learn? Is that something that you've memorized and learned because of that? I'm just genuinely curious about that.
I think everybody does that a little bit differently. I have enough music theory to be able to analyze that kind of thing. And if asked, I can approach something that way. If somebody in a recording, in that line, could you make sure, cover the sharp 11 and the third on that line somewhere, etc. If someone asked me something like that, I could do that. But I'm never thinking of that in particular as I'm singing. So especially if I'm improvising or changing a melody, I'm not thinking, I'm going to go up to the 7 there and then I'm going to end on the 5th. I don't think of it that way. If someone then asks me what I did, I could say that. But I'm not thinking of it in that context. I'm hearing just what notes are there, and I'm not consciously thinking of it in terms of what the chord tones are. And different people do that differently. I know instrumental musicians might think of that more than I do. Maybe some don't. And some singers do that way more than I do. And there's some singers that if you were to ask them, maybe they don't know those qualities at all, and they can still be fantastic singers. So I also, growing up through music education, definitely went through some phases where I felt like if you didn't know that stuff, if I didn't know those things, then I was a less than, right? You're lesser than if you don't know the nuts and bolts of that. And I don't think that's true. It may not be able to get you some kind of certain work, or if there's certain things you're hired for that require that kind of thing, maybe you're out of the running for that. But I don't think it makes you any less musical if you don't necessarily always know. There's some very intuitive singers with great ears that might not be able to tell you about all of the chord changes they're singing in. It doesn't make them any less spectacular.
Yeah. And I think the flip side is also true. Because I think that as someone who doesn't work full-time in music, there has been this sense of, maybe I'm less than because I'm not full-time. Or maybe I'm not as good of a musician because I'm not full-time. And it's taken a number of people in my life to be like, no, you're good, and you're good enough for what we're asking for here. And I think that is something that I've had to work through myself, is to think about what is my relationship to working, being a working musician, and how do I feel about my own chops because I've chosen a different career path. And I think that I did have this false equivalency of, I have to be full-time in order to be good. And I think what you were just saying is like, I have to know all the things for me to be considered good. And I think there are two sides of a similar type of coin where we're talking about, hey, what is the imposter syndrome that you deal with as a musician, and how do you address that? So just something to think about.
Yeah.
Okay. Any last thoughts about this?
Oh man, no, I just love it so much. Everyone I've ever played it for is just like, wow.
Yes.
So I'm glad we've included it. And I'd love to hear what people think about this. And anyone who knows the Sing a Rainbow song, I have not seen the movie from which it derived. There have been other recordings of it other than just Peggy Lee. So I'd be fascinated to hear from listeners their experience of hearing a different verse to it. I think it works great, though.
Yeah, it definitely fits within the theme. So maybe it's time for a movie night.
I guess so.
Okay.
It's time to watch that.
Awesome. Okay, well, before we wrap up, there is one more thing that we do, which is...
Mailbag.
So if you would like to send us a question or just ask us something that you want us to noodle on, please email it to us, themusiciansloop@gmail.com. That is LOUPE. Or same thing, The Musicians Loop on Instagram as well as on Threads. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, so this week's question does come from Threads. This is from Pisgah Music from November of 2025. Brittany is her name, and she writes, I think we need artists more now than we ever have. Creativity helps us discover our true selves and slip into the perspectives and emotions of others. It helps us connect to each other and contextualize what it means to be human, all in its messy, chaotic glory. If you're an artist, and we all are in some capacity, and you're struggling, you are worthwhile and your work is worthwhile. Signed, A Stranger on the Internet.
Yes.
And so,
yes, Brittany, you're right.
Yeah, and I love this too, which is why I wanted to read it out loud. But I'm kind of curious, like the questions that come for me through this statement is, do you feel like we need this, or we as in like musicians, right, need this type of validation, and why? And yeah, just kind of curious. There are a couple of other follow-up questions that I have around this, but that was the first question that came up to me. It's like, why do we feel like we need to say this in this moment?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think it's easy as technology advances, as the world gets crazy, as other things take over our lives, and the face forward stuff that we read about seems to be less and less about artistry, even in kind of non-artistic places, in business, in your industry, in software, in movies, in art in general, in TV shows. And we're starting to hear more about the way artificial intelligence has come into all of these different things, and just reminders. And then when we hear those as artists, who most of us are already just looking for an excuse to be hard on ourselves and think that we are less than and not worthy, and imposter syndrome stuff happening to us. And so that's why I think this thing from Brittany is so true, is to just remember to create things and be artistic, and just to be able to share things. Even in this podcast, just sharing these songs, sharing this version of Over the Rainbow that you've never heard, even though you've heard the song a bajillion times, is like so important to me. Oh, look at this beautiful piece of art that was created in the 1960s that I never heard. There's so much out there. Yes, so important to just remember that the art that you create is adding, and it's not all going to be amazing. As cheesy as it sounds, touching just one other human, then you've succeeded.
Yeah, I love that. I think that there is something, especially as being a live musician, but I also as like someone who records, that there is that sense of connection. I think it's more evident when you're performing live, or when you're in a sacred space that we're holding space for a very human experience. I am struck, especially as someone who works in a creative industry, like a company that forwards like creative expression. And in this world of generative AI, just how tricky those conversations are. And I think that's something that I try to lean into, right? In like all of my work, how do I bring the humanity in that work? I'm kind of curious about like some of the other thoughts that sparked as a part of this great post. As we think about ourselves as musicians, and I know you and I have talked about this before, it's not always the same level of creativity, right? The type of creativity that comes from writing a song is very different than when you're doing a gig of the same 12, 15 songs that you have in the previous city, right? And so I'm kind of curious about like what meaning you find in this musical expression, and how does that change with the context? Is mixing a show different than being on stage? Is that different than writing? Like, and how do you feel that human connection, each one of these things, like, is it all reflected in those, or are there different contexts in which you find meaning in different, at some point in time, there's like just a paycheck, right? Or is it equal? Is it one of those things where each one of those experiences is equal from that human connection perspective?
I think that's really different for everybody. I know artists, creatives, musicians who just love working in the studio. They don't like being in front of other people necessarily, don't like live performance or whatever. They just love creating the studio. They're just happy there. They have the ability to edit a lot more. They can fix little mistakes that they've made. And I know people that are the opposite. They just love being in front of people, letting music happen in the moment. Oops, a mistake just happened, but the longer I think about it, the more mistakes I'm about to have. So it just goes and we move right on, and it happened so fast no one really noticed it. In the studio, it's under the microscope and we can rewind it and listen to it over and over and over. So I like both of those settings and both of those art forms, even including as an engineer, as a mix engineer. Even if it's something egregious, like I'm, mixing my Gentleman in take 6. If a song starts and for some reason I have somebody's mic muted and their mic just isn't even turned on when the song starts, it's like, that's the worst, like correcting that mistake right away. Well, the more I let myself be mad at myself because I didn't turn a mic on at the beginning of a song, the more likely I am to miss the next little cool reverb I like to add, or I'm going to miss something if I get mired in that. Whereas if I do that in a studio, it's like, oh, hey, yeah, do that again. I had your mic off. Go ahead. Here we go. Well, you just start. It's like it's nothing. But also then, oh, yeah, your intro, you were a little bit flat. Here, give it to me again. Here we go. Oh, okay. Maybe open the vowel a little bit more on the, you could spend an hour on a thing that just went by live. So it's they're different, but for me, I've said this before in our venture here in the podcast, they all serve the same thing for me. The creative in me is really more about just sharing with others and sharing this music. So if I'm mixing, it's like, ooh, these artists or whoever it is that I'm behind the soundboard for, like, oh, they're doing this thing. I can help show off how cool this music is to people by emphasizing it in such a way that I think, they're the ones creating it, but I can sure mess it up. I can sure, but I don't want to. I want to help accentuate it. I don't want to mess it up. I want to be a good vehicle for them in the process, because the last place it goes after they make it is through the board I'm controlling. So I want to emphasize it and like, hey, look at, again, my phrases, look at how cool music is. Look at how cool this thing is. Not look at how cool I am at the board. Just look at how cool music is. And the faders and the knobs that I touch can help make it as good as possible. Again, just like sharing this song. Look at how cool this version of Over the Rainbow is. Look at how cool this different intro is. That it really does feed the same thing as if I'm up on the stage. Hey, the next song we're going to sing is this. In the back of my mind, the thing is like, I can't wait for you to hear how cool this music is that Duke Ellington wrote and that we're going to sing now, or that Janice Siegel wrote, or that Cheryl Benteen wrote, etc. Look at how cool it is. Or, hey, I'm going to send you a playlist, or back in the day, a mixtape of something. Look at how cool music is. So that it's all feeding to that for me, but everybody definitely has a different approach and reason for doing the thing they do.
Yeah, I find it fascinating the way that you frame that. And part of the reason, as you were talking, I was thinking about why I felt like certain types of musicianship connected me more. And I think that there's a sense of instant gratification in certain types of experiences, where if I am in front of a congregation or in front of an audience and I'm doing something, there's this immediate connection that I have, an immediate feedback that I get. Whereas when I'm recording something, even as we're recording this podcast, right, we know that there's an audience out there that's going to listen to it eventually, but, they're not in the room with us. We're not responding and reacting to people who are engaging with us in the moment. And I think that is a different type. It seems to be a little more intellectual until we begin to interact with other people in the context of like sharing out this podcast or whatever it is. And I think that is something that I need to think about, right? What is more connecting for me? Is it the in-person experience? Is it a more digital experience? Is it delayed reaction as I'm recording something and sharing something with the world? It is something that I'm grappling with as someone who is, I'd say, mixed media in that case. There are certain things that I do that are years in the making that don't even see the light of day until 5 years later, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And what does that mean for my connection? Even if I intellectually know I'm doing something for someone else's participation and consumption and engagement with.
Yeah.
So yeah, just something to think about. So with that mic drop, I think it's a great place for us to end here. Thank you all for joining us. Don't forget, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else to add?
Yes. Like, listen, subscribe, etc. All the things. Let us know what you think about this stuff. Any song ideas, any comments. Trist talk less. Trist talk more, etc. That kind of thing. Let us know what you think.
Awesome. Well, with that, we will see you next week.
Thanks. Wow, who is this? Is this Sarah Vaughan? I digress. Recording stopped. I'm going to stop my recording.